Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the 1985 candidates cycle, and in particular the match between Jan Timman and Mikhail Tal. First, a little historical background here and how this match came to be. There was a tournament um, that took place in Montpellier, France, in 1985, in order to determine the next challenger for the world championship, which, of course, at this time was newly crowned champion Gary Kasparov. And the way it worked was just the top four finishers would qualify to actually play matches. So there was a tournament, and then the top four would play matches against each other. In this particular tournament, Tal and Jan Timman tied for the last qualifying spot. So therefore, they had a playoff, and this is what we are going to look at today. Now, those of you who are familiar with Tal, Tal has had at this point by 1985 is older now. He's been around forever. He was world champion in 1960, and played in many candidates matches, um, throughout the years. So Tal is an old man at this point, very dangerous still, and still capable of presenting some brilliant chess over the board. As you can see that he made it this far to even qualify for this playoff match. Timon at this point was um, pretty much in his prime, at his peak. His time was basically, in the 70s and 80s, where at his top level he was considered, basically the best Western chess player, and I believe he even rose as high as number three in the world, behind Kasparov and Anatoly Karpov. He was Dutch champion many times, I think like 9 times or something like that. And so here he is, pretty much at his peak, um, facing Tao, um, in this playoff, and older Tao. So game one was drawn. We'll just briefly just look at this opening real quick. Just English played by Tao. Game was quickly drawn, and 20 something moves here. So now we move on to game two. And now we have Jan Timman with the white pieces versus Tao with the black pieces. Here's game two of the playoff 1985 candidate. So d4 by Timman, d5, c4, and here d takes c4 from Tao. Queen's Gambit accepted, and we see e4. All right, which is not seen too often, but it's has a dangerous, reputation. Actually, this is what you want to play, right? This is the whole purpose of the King's Gambit. But normally, excuse me, Queen's Gambit. But normally, you see the move e3. So e4, e5, knight f3. This is an old idea, I think, attributed to Bronstein, basically to allow black to capture the pawn and keep on d4, and then just keep developing, basically developing around the pawn. Because as you see, black has no development at this point. Bishop takes c4, check, knight bd2, knight c6 from Tau, castle, queen f6, and here is I look at this move a little ambitious here. They're following some theory at the time, or another grandmaster game at the time, but perhaps bishop e6 or knight f6 maybe is a little better, but queen f6 kind of uh, prov- provokes white's next move, which is e5. Natural move, being the head of development, king in the middle of the board, is very provocative. Of course, right in line with Tao's style here. So queen g6, knight h4, and of course Timon goes right after uh, the king, And Timman wasn't the type to shy away from complications. I mean, he was a fighter in the line of Lasker. In other words, he wouldn't look at Tal and say, well, Tal likes complicated positions. Let me go in the opposite direction and try to play quietly. He's the type of player that says, okay, you want to play complicated positions? Let's play a complicated position and see who comes out the better man. So he's challenged this Tal here. Queen G4, Knight DF3, avoiding the exchange of queens, and now Bishop E6. So, in spite of Tal's queen maneuvers, right, and getting his queen knocked around, he seems to be doing okay at this point. Timman plays H3, hitting the queen again, and the queen comes to the center. So you see this bold, imaginative play by Tal. You know, even as an older person, like, he's just not afraid. Bishop D3, hitting the queen again, Queen D5, and the queen just comes right back to D5. Knight G5, and we see Timman just still going after the initiative. Now, Bishop E7 is played. Now here, perhaps Tal takes it a little too far. Maybe he should have just castled on the queen side, right? I don't see anything wrong with that. Knight to XE5 looks risky, but perhaps that's playable. But definitely, I like the idea of just castling, getting the king out of there. So instead, he brings the bishop back to E7, and now this gives Timman another chance to hit the queen again. So Bishop E4, Queen D7 again. Queen takes E5. You know, that might be pushing it a little bit. So the bishop pair is taken. Knight takes E6. Queen takes E6. And now here's a critical moment in the game. Timman plays Bishop takes C6. Okay, and excuse me. And Tal has a choice here. He can play Queen takes C6 or B takes C6. Tal chooses B takes C6. Again, very sharp and provocative. And this is the type of play White looked for in this opening. Now, now after Queen takes C6, White can play Queen takes D4, preventing the queen side castling. But then Black has some interesting play here. He can play Bishop C5, say Queen G4, attacking G7. But then again in Tal style, basically leaving the G pawn, play Knight E7. Of course, if Queen takes G7, then Rook G8. So Bishop G5, and then Queen E6. And let's say Rook AC1, Queen takes G4, H takes G4, Bishop B6. Say Rook FD1, again preventing the castling, and then Rook G8. And the position seems, a bit, double-edged. It's not absolutely clear. Maybe White has a slight advantage because of better piece coordination. But these sound good. But as far as the practicality or going on for a win, might be problematic. Perhaps even better than the move like Rook G8 is just Knight C6, right? Attacking the E pawn. So it's not absolutely clear. Again, Black does have a problem coordinating his rooks. For example, Knight F8 here. Knight F5, excuse me, King F8. And the position's not really that clear. Bishop F4 protecting the pawn. And so if Black can solve the problem of, how to get his rooks in the game, like, he should be okay. But right now, White, basically has just more space, and his pieces are placed better right now. But how does this translate going forward? It's hard to tell. So Queen takes C6 was definitely an option, but it's understandable. A player like Tal, he probably was looking for more dynamic opportunities immediately, and he probably saw the situation where his rooks wouldn't really be in the game, and so he played for this opportunity. And the main reason is that by keeping the queen on e6, he keeps an eye on the e pawn, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So queen takes d4 was played by Timman, rook d8. So now he grabs the tempo, queen a4, and now bishop c5 is played. And now here, um, bishop takes h4 was an option, just getting rid of this knight here. Queen takes h4, knight e7, and bishop g5. And now the comes, black has those horrible pawns on the queen side, and it's very difficult in the endgame. So that choice structurally for is you know, it's an interesting choice by Tal. It's hard for that type of structure to hold up, especially on the open C file. So queen takes d4 happened, rook d8, queen a4, and now bishop c5. So this makes room, of course, for the knight to be able to come out to e7, and it's a nice, active move. It protects the pawn on a7. It's hard to criticize that, but in these type of situations, it's hard to play in generalities because the variations tend to be really concrete. For example, after bishop g5, for example, if you play knight e7 here, right, say, it's your idea, then just simply bishop takes e7. And now you either have to play bishop takes e7, which kind of admits that it was an error to bring the bishop to c5, or you try to play queen takes e7, but then you get hit with knight f5, followed by knight takes g7. So then the other option is simply bring the king out to e7, which you don't want to do that either. Anyway, Timman did not play bishop g5, which probably was a better continuation. Knight g5 also is very interesting. Not knight g5, I'm sorry, knight f5, because you have all of the situations with this weak c pawn. So for example, if queen takes f5, you have queen takes c6, check, and then if he goes back, then you pick up the bishop. So you can see that even though bishop c5 seems like like a natural looking move, that it doesn't really hold up under concrete analysis. So at the bishop c5, it seems that Tal got away with one here. But queen c2 was a good move also, although it wasn't the strongest by Timman. Rook d5, and this is part of Tal's plan for keeping why he didn't take on c6 with the queen. Is that way the queen is already on putting pressure on e5, and now he brings the rook and just threatens to win the pawn. And notice with the bishop on f5, I'm sorry, with the bishop on c5, f4 is not possible because of the pin on the king. So although Tal's plan might have been a little faulty, at least he has a plan. And I always say this, it's better to have a bad plan than just no plan at all. b4, this is possible that this move was overlooked by Tal, but this kind of this type of moves usually break positions open. The player is not fully developed. You see the knight and the rook on the back rank, and basically while Tal is in this state of lack of coordination, Timman starts the conflict. So after b4, bishop d4 by Tal. So he goes for the counterattack. Bishop takes b4 is kind of asking for trouble. At the rook b1, it allows white to speed up this initiative. Say versus a5, then a3, and this rook is going going straight to the back rank. Let's say he just goes back, right, for argument's sake. Then rook b8, king e7, and knight f5 check. Right, king d7, and be met by knight f3. Black is in serious trouble here. So Tal wants to keep things closed, and he attacks the rook. Knight f5. And you can see the fork idea right here on g7. The knight just wants to go there next move. So Tal plays bishop takes e5, so he steals a pawn, right? The audacity, right? He steals a pawn and stops this idea. But Timman have seen that he just plays rook e1, because this battery of queen and king lined up on the open file is just recipe for disaster. King f8, and now bishop b2, just pin him and win him. So now queen takes f5 was taken, and this is like an attempt to escape from Tal. Queen takes f5, queen takes f5, and that was his idea. Bishop h2 check, king takes h2, rook takes f5. Okay, so now Tal is up a pawn, but the problem is his pieces are dead, and he has really no coordination here. He can't even play a simple move like knight e7 or knight f6 or knight h6. Right? He has to play, if he's going to get out, he has to try to play f6. But f6 is then meant by rook d7. Okay, only other move is really rook d5, which he plays during the game. And Timman just grabs that and plays rook c1. And he's just going to start dropping all type of pawns on the queen side. And so Tal just resigns. So this is a unusual situation, right? When you look at Tal's games, you don't normally see him not having any development and just getting basically pushed around, right? It's basically Timman, played Tal in his own style. Okay, so that was game 2. And I just wanted to show you this other idea after king f8, bishop b2. It showed you queen takes f5, which happened on the game. Another idea is f6, just trying to hold this piece here. Now, if f4, then white is still better, but you can still kind of do the same thing with this queen takes f5 here. So it would be queen takes f5, queen takes f5, and then bishop d4 check. So kind of the same idea. So forget about the f4 and stuff like that. So after f6, just rook ac1, just piling up the pressure on these weak pawns is good. So there's many moves to do. Rook ac1 can be played. f4 again, as I just showed you. Queen takes, bishop d4, rook takes f5, and rook ac1. So it's just that at the end of the day, black just has too many weaknesses in the position. For him to be able to mount up any type of serious resistance. And so that was the end of game 2. So I'll see you on the next game.